Hey guys, it's Timothy here. I have been very busy the last couple weeks, so I haven't made any new videos. I think it's been about 2 weeks. Eldritch Moon has been out for almost the entirety of that 2 weeks. I think it'll be 2 weeks this coming up Friday. And I've been lucky enough to be able to do 5 sealed events and a good number of drafts, so I feel like I've got a pretty good grasp on what is and is not good here. What I want to talk about today is 5 build-around cards that you can use to hopefully win your next draft. Maybe things haven't been going well, or maybe you're looking for something kind of niche or something out of the ordinary to draft around. These are 5 cards I've noticed, and while I haven't played them all myself, I've noticed that they fit into a very specific kind of deck, and you can win with all of them. Some of them are a little on the janky side, to be honest, and some of them are pretty straightforward. But let's go ahead and jump right in. Remember, leave comments below and let me know what cards you like to build around in this set. I'm having quite a bit of fun with the set so far, and I like how it melds with, no pun intended, Shadows over Innistrad. So let's go ahead and jump right in. The first card I'm going to talk about is an uncommon enchantment, Campaign of Vengeance. I've seen this in a couple drafts, and I've seen it go late, but I actually lost to it for the first time in my most recent draft. It's a 5-mana, 3 white and black enchantment that says whenever a creature you control attacks, the defending player loses a life and you gain a life, and this does work for each creature you're attacking with. So the idea here is you build up a presence of maybe little creatures that are going to keep your life total high and creatures that won't be easy to kill off in combat, ideally skulk creatures or fly and spirits or something along those lines, and you kind of get in there and wait until you get your campaign on board, and then you use campaign as your win condition. One problem with white and black in Shadows over Innistrad is that it was lacking a good way to win the game unless you hit some bomb rare. You had to win with, you know, getting in there with tiny creatures, or you had to draft something like Morkrut Necropod to kind of go over the top and have late game. Campaign of Vengeance turns all of your little creatures, or the whole black-white deck in general, into a way to kill your opponent. So Cutthroat, cards like Vampire Cutthroat, Farbog Revenant aren't normally fantastic cards. They're okay, they're kind of filler, but when you have Campaign of Vengeance in, they go way up, and they essentially do double time while still keeping your life total high. A card like Cutthroat or Farbog Revenant is basically a 2-point life swing in both directions when you have Campaign of Vengeance. Not to mention there's a lot of token makers, so you can really go wide with Campaign of Vengeance. Haunted Dead is a great card that fits right into the deck, and it's just a great card in general, but it makes 2 bodies, it can recur itself, and you usually don't mind swinging in. When you swing in with Haunted Dead plus the Spirit token, that's again a 2-point life swing in both directions, and you have means of getting Haunted Dead back, making another Spirit, and just going off that way. It's very hard to race Campaign of Vengeance when you're going wide and your opponent's trying to go big. Spectral Reserves is kind of a meh card, but I feel like it fit the deck perfectly, especially since it curves right into Campaign of Vengeance. Spectral Reserves is 4 mana for 2 1/1 spirit tokens, and it gains you 2 life. Usually not a fantastic card, but I've actually found it to be a little more impressive than I thought it was. I considered it probably one of the worst white commons, and while I do think the power level of white is pretty high as far as commons and uncommons go, I've actually been impressed with the way Spectral Reserves works. But the 2 life right off the bat, plus the life you'll be gaining from campaign, again, makes it really hard for your opponent to race when your life total keeps going up and theirs keeps going down due to this enchantment. And then finally I mentioned Call of the Bloodline, or basically anything that can generate tokens turn over after turn. Not to mention that Call of the Bloodline makes a lifelink in tokens, so again, you're making an army of creatures that are going to increase your life total, while Campaign of Vengeance will do the work. Maybe your creatures won't get in, maybe you're just suiciding them, or maybe you're just attacking into 0-4s or something like that, but Campaign of Vengeance will do the work for you in the long run, assuming you can get it down at a healthy life total and have the board presence to back it up. Next card I want to talk about here is a common, and I think it's actually a really impressive common after playing with it a couple times. That card is Bloodbriar. And now before I say anything about limited, I will say I think this card even has potential in standard right now. Don't crucify me for that. It is a 3-drop, so it has a lot of competition. We still have Collected Company around. But think about in the course of the game how many times you sacrifice a permanent. Bloodbriar gets a 1/1 counter whenever you sacrifice any permanent, not just a creature. So in an average game, standard and limited, you'll definitely be sacrificing something along the road, or at least I normally do in my games. Now, Bloodbriar, I say, is a build-around because you can take these early and then really prioritize cards that cause you to sacrifice things. So think about a couple white cards like Extricator of Sin, which turns into Extricator of Flush, both sides of which cause you to sacrifice things or have the potential to grow Bloodbriar. My thing with Bloodbriar is it starts off as a decent creature on its own. It's definitely filler level at a 2/3 for 3, but once it gets even one counter, it's definitely justified its mana cost. A 3/4 for 3 is fantastic, and the fact that it can just grow from there makes it even better. So repeatable sacrifice engines like Extricator of Flush or even Lunarch Mantle, which isn't a particularly impressive card on its own, things that let you sacrifice over and over again are really, really good with Bloodbriar. Lunarch Mantle especially turns Bloodbriar into a Fireball if you're willing to sacrifice enough. Fireball, not Firebolt. If you're willing to sacrifice enough permanents for it. Keep in mind there are other cards. Think about every time you sack something to go search for lands, whether it's Terrarion, Warped Landscape, anything that involves mana fixing from your deck usually involves you sacrificing some sort of permanent. Being able to crack a Terrarion, fix your colors, and grow a Bloodbriar seems like a fantastic play for me. And then you've even got these kind of janky creatures that sacrifice themselves when they attack. I think there are 2 or 3 in this set. Runaway Carriage, Impetuous Devils, things like that. But even those get in for a big amount of damage and then grow your Bloodbriar. Say that 5 times fast. Grow your Bloodbriar. Anyway, just to kind of let you know that I'm not burning steam here, I kind of went crazy with all the cards that you can sacrifice. Think about all of the cards in this set that cause you to sacrifice something, whether it's sacrificing the creature itself, whether it's sacrificing some sort of artifact or enchantment or land. There are so many freaking cards in this set. Good cards, mind you, that let you sacrifice things. How about Emerge? Every single Emerge creature has an Emerge cost which requires you to sacrifice something that grows your Bloodbriars, assuming you're not sacking the Bloodbriar itself. How about those crappy Vessel cards? Even the bad Vessel cards are still something to sacrifice to grow your 3-mana 2/3 into a 3/4 or beyond. Some of these cards aren't even that bad. Vessel of Nascency, Vessel of Ephemera. How about anything that makes clue tokens? Whenever you sacrifice a clue token, Bloodbriar gets bigger. There's bound to be at least one of... this must be 30 or 40 cards. And they all produce something or themselves produce a way of sacrificing something and growing Bloodbriar out of control potentially. Like I said, you only really need one counter to make it great. But if you can get multiple sacrifice engines going or multiple cards in your deck that create clue tokens or create value from sacrificing permanents, then Bloodbriar is an auto-include that really, really gets out of hand. Or we can just draft Big Daddy Gitrog and sacrifice to our heart's content and win the game that way, right? What card were we talking about again? I don't quite remember. Anyway, we're going to move on. Displace is not a particularly impressive card, but if you've watched any of my videos before, you know I have a really deep fondness of blanking effects, especially ones that put creatures back on the battlefield instantaneously. Now, it's kind of awkward that Displace is in the set because there's another blank card called Long Road Home that does something very similar, but that one doesn't replace the creature until the end step, and it can also target your opponent's stuff, plus it has the little shtick about putting a 1/1 counter on it. Displace is a little more versatile as to how effective it is and how many creatures you can target, but a little limited in that you can only target your own creatures, and it does put them back on the battlefield instantaneously, which is what I like about it. Now, the reason I call it a build-around is because you'll be looking at the other cards in your deck that work with Displace. It's not the type of card you normally take early and then draft around it, so maybe I'm kind of stretching the term build around here, but it is the type of card that once you have it, you'll definitely start to look at what other cards work with it well. It's tailor-made for ETB triggers like any kind of blink effect is. You have some pretty good ones in the set. Enlightened Maniac is actually a decent card, which I kind of knocked in my review of it for being a little underwhelming, but you do get 2 bodies, and if you can blink it out, you get that other 3/2, which is fantastic. Same goes for Foul Emissary, which just has a fantastic ETB trigger on its own. Obviously, if you're abusing ETB triggers, you've got tons and tons of them in this set, mostly in Bant colors, but across all colors. Black and red have a few, but not as many as Bant colors do. But if you can rebuy any of these triggers, then that's fantastic. Not to mention, there are a lot of enchantments in this set that kind of bog your creatures down. Think Choke and Restraints, Bound by Moonsilver, Spontaneous Mutation, Sleep Paralysis, all really, really good cards that stop your creatures from being effective. A card like Displace really bumps off that enchantment and lets you use your creature again. Not to mention blink effects in general let you avoid certain combat tricks or avoid certain removal spells. If your opponent's tossing a Fiery Temper at your creature, well, displace it in response and save your creature. It's just a 1-for-1 trade, and you get to keep your board presence while your opponent is down a removal spell. Flicker effects like this, blink effects, are usually a lot better than people give them credit for. And I know one of my underrated cards from Shadows over Innistrad was Essence Flux. I think Displace is a little bit better than Essence Flux because it allows you to target up to 2. Now, I'm not saying first pick Displace. Definitely don't do that because there are better cards, and sometimes you don't even want a card like this. But if you know your deck can really abuse Displace, I suggest picking 1 or 2 of them and then seeing where it goes from there. Next card up is Cigars Aid. This is a rare, and it's a type of card that I'm super disappointed to pick most of the time, so it's kind of weird that I'm talking about it in this video, but I think there's a lot of potential in the card. So in case you don't know what it does, Cigars Aid is a 1 white enchantment that says you may cast R's and equipments as though they had flash, and the very important part here, whenever an equipment enters the battlefield under your control, you may attach it to target creature you control. That's for free as well. You do not have to pay the equip cost. So this card comes down very, very cheap, very, very early, and it suddenly lets you play a lot of your more risky cards at instant speed, which makes them much, much better. Think about a card like Faith Unbroken. You don't want to get blown out when you cast an enchantment. That's part of the reason people usually tell newer players to avoid enchantments. Obviously, Faith Unbroken is a tier above most common or uncommon enchantments in what it does, but being able to cast it at instant speed gives you just that much more reassurance that you're not going to get blown out by it. Doing it at the end of your opponent's turn when they're tapped out rather than during your turn when they have a bunch of mana up seems like the best way to use it, and Cigars Aid lets you do that at instant speed. The same goes for really strong equipment, which there is some in this set. Stitcher's Graft is a fantastic equipment with very, very low cost. Cigars Aid essentially turns it into a giant growth that also sticks around on your creature. The cool thing about Cigars Aid and Stitcher's Graft is that Cigars Aid can be used to actually get rid of or to circumvent the first ability on Stitcher's Graft, which requires your creature to stay tapped. If you attack with the creature first, then you flash in Stitcher's Graft before blocks or something like that, or before damage, you'll have already attacked with it, and Stitcher's Graft will not have triggered, so you do not have to worry about keeping it tapped down during the next turn, allowing you to get another big swing before Stitcher's Graft really becomes detrimental. Stitcher's Graft, I would also advocate just being a good card in general for its cheap equip cost, but when you can flash it in for 1 mana, give a permanent giant growth on a creature, probably win a combat that way, and then still have your creature available to attack with the +3/+3 on it, I don't see how you can lose that game, or at least not get a huge, huge advantage if this is early in the game. Couple other things to keep in mind. Skin Invasion works with Cigars Aid. It is an aura that you can flash on an opponent's creature before it's about to die, and then get your 3/4. I've noticed with Skin Invasion, the payoff is really, really high, but sometimes it can be really tough to get that creature or to die, to get the enchanted creature to die, so you actually get your 3/4, and sometimes your opponent is ready with bounce spells and so on and so forth. That's still going to be true, but the fact that you can flash this in during combat with Cigars Aid makes it that much more likely that you're going to get the 3/4 off of it. Imprisoned in the Moon is a blue removal spell for just about everything, plus ramping your opponent ahead in Limited is a lot less detrimental than it is in Constructed, even though it's still not something you always want to do. But being able to deal with pretty much any threat at instant speed is fantastic. Not to mention Imprison in the Moon is already a good card. You're not stretching it to include Cigars Aid in, say, your blue-white aura base deck or something like that. And finally, Wolfkin Bond is another card that deserves mention here, because flashing a Wolfkin Bond does a very good impression of something like Pack Guardian, where you make a big body, presumably the creature you're enchanted, plus you get that 2/2 wolf, and you can really blow somebody out in combat. Keep in mind, Cigars Aid does not necessarily stop you from being blown out with your auras or equipment, but it does kind of get around having to dump a lot of mana at an inopportune time, having to do it at sorcery speed, and having to do it on your turn so that you're broadcasting what you're doing before you declare attacks or something like that, or before you go to blocks. Doing it at instant speed makes these cards fantastic, and I will hopefully be a time where I'll actually draft Cigars Aid and get back to you on how good it is. Again, I haven't actually played this card. I've passed it a couple times, and I've noticed it goes really late in the packs, but I would not be surprised to see that it's actually a very good card in a deck built to abuse it. Final card I'm going to talk about, Lupine Prototype. When I saw this card, I was under the impression it was actually just an actively bad card. My opinion hasn't changed that much. I'm still under the impression that I would not pick this over a very solid uncommon in most of the packs, but I have a feeling that there are decks that can abuse this and win with it if they get going early enough. Think about cards like Noose Constrictor and Olivia's Dragoon. And to a lesser extent, you have something like Ravenous Bloodseeker, or pretty much anything that lets you pitch cards as much as you want. Play Lupine Prototype on turn 2, followed up with one of these guys on turn 3, pitch your hand, swing for 5. That is a very, very threatening clock in a game of Limited, and most decks will not be able to keep up with it. The problem, of course, is that you're pitching your whole hand away, and you have to keep your hand empty in order to do it, but Noose Constrictor and Olivia's Dragoon will help you do that. Not to mention, they're decent cards that should be able to swing in the early game and get extra damage in alongside the Prototype. I would be super happy to pick up a Prototype once I know I'm in a deck that can really toss my cards away rather than taking the Prototype and drafting these cards, but it is a complete build around. I could definitely see somebody ambitiously taking a pack 1, pick 1 Lupine Prototype and then going all in on Madness or something along these lines to empty their hand as soon as possible and start smashing with the Prototype. Other cards include Fury Blade Vampire, Stromkirk Condemned. Anything that lets you pitch one card at a time is still gonna get you there very fast. You can pitch your lands. Obviously, you want to have a very low curve deck. You don't want a bunch of 4, 5s, and 6s, otherwise you're not going to be able to cast them, or you're just going to be throwing them away to these discard outlets. But if you can make a really, really low curve deck, maybe a 16 land deck as well, so you're not drawing a lot of lands, you can really take advantage of effects like Fury Blade Vampire, Lupine Prototype, and just be complete aggro and try to shut your opponent down before they get going. Collective Brutality lets you discard 2 cards on top of a 2 mana cost for some actually pretty decent effects. The life gain, well, that's just there for bonus. But if you're trying to get your Prototype online and you're trying to attack or block as early as possible, I would not mind having Collective Brutality in the deck as well. Not to mention, I have a good chance of being able to get a Brutality plus an Olivia's Dragoon, given that the Dragoon is a common. And then Bloodhall Priest deserves mention here, too. I don't imagine you'll see Bloodhall Priest passed very often, since you'll only see it in pack 1 or 2, but it is another card that incentivizes you to empty your hand and plays very, very closely with Lupine Prototype. Now, I'm not saying that there's going to be a top-tier limited deck that's based on emptying your hand, but it's very easy to imagine a situation in which you pick a Bloodhall Priest and then get past a Lupine Prototype, simply because a lot of people will not be interested in the Prototype. Most decks can't support a card like this, and you can't afford to have a dead card until turn 6 or 7, not to mention you don't often want to pitch your better cards just to be able to attack with a vanilla creature. So I would look to pick up a lot of these cards if I really want to abuse Prototype, but again, I'm not advocating for necessarily taking Prototype. I'm just saying if you want to try something fun out and you get the pieces for it, there's this deck available for you. that's all I got for you. A couple honorable mentions that didn't quite make this list for me. Lone Rider is a very, very weak creature on the front and an exceptionally strong creature on the back, but there's not a lot to say about it as far as interest and strategies go. Just gain 3 life and Lone Rider will flip. You could easily even play something like Peace of Mind if you were really desperate to flip it, but there's just not that much interest in synergy as far as anything but just pure life gain goes. Permeate and Mass is another card I'm still advocating for being quite poor, and a card that I would never be super happy to see in my first pack, plus a card that I would pass for a lot of solid commons or uncommons. But the reason I mention it as an honorable mention is because it has a really nice interaction with a specific card, Give No Ground, which is +2/+6, and target creature can block any number of creatures. Just imagine that in your head for a second, and then imagine what that turns into. And finally, Waxing Moon didn't make this list because it's less of a build around and more of a card that fits into a deck, kind of like all of the werewolf cards, like Howlpack Resurgence or Moonlight Hunt or something like that. Waxing Moon is insane when you have the quote-unquote werewolf deck. Say you play turn 1 Kessig Howler and then turn 2 Prowler, whatever it is, and then turn 2 Waxing Moon, you just get to start smashing for 4 on turn 2, which is crazy. Not to mention Waxing Moon does work with pretty much every werewolf in Eldritch Moon. They turn into some really freaking strong creatures on the back. Anyway, those were honorable mentions. They didn't quite make this list because there wasn't quite that much interesting stuff to talk about. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Let me know what your favorite build-arounds in this set are. Maybe you're really interested in Emrakul and you want to know how to build around it. Maybe you're really interested in meld cards and you want to know how to maximize your ability to meld Chittering Hosts or something like that. I don't know. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you're interested in building around. Let me know what story... Sorry about that screensaver. You see the always watching screensaver, right? Anyway, let me know what you're thinking. My name is Timothy. Like, comment, and subscribe for more videos. Please leave a comment so we can have a conversation. I really enjoy talking about it. And I will see you guys soon for more videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.